Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Talk Soccer to Me podcast, an American soccer podcast for the American soccer fan. The show is hosted by yours truly, Jack Alt. Today is Friday, February 14th. This is the 12th episode of the Talk Soccer to Me podcast. This is the Valentine's Day episode. We've got plenty to talk about. We're going to talk about the 8 Champions League matchups that just happened in the first knockout round. We have one single yet fantastic Premier League matchup from Wednesday to discuss. A few matches from the Europa League and the Conference League that I want to highlight, and then we're going to go over the state of the cups, see where the domestic cup competitions are currently sitting between the top 5 leagues. Before we get into all the action, make sure to follow Talk Soccer to Me on all socials and streaming services, at Talk Soccer to Me on Twitter and TikTok, the at Talk Soccer to Me podcast on Instagram. To listen again, Talk Soccer to Me is listed on Spotify, Amazon Podcasts, and Apple Podcasts. Follows and positive ratings go a really long way for the podcast. So just thank you to all who follow, listen, like, subscribe, comment, repost, everything and all the above. Really glad to be getting an episode out today. I do want to apologize. I had planned on getting one out to talk about all the cup matches from the week before, whether it would be the League Cup semifinals where Newcastle defeated Arsenal and Liverpool defeated Tottenham, all the FA Cup matches from the weekend, missed out on some good Italian league matches, Moise Kean defeating Inter with Fiorentina, and then a couple days later, Inter playing Fiorentina again. I really don't know what the scheduling was there. I guess it was a makeup game. But we're back. We're back on track. We're going to get out these Champions League matches. We got another podcast coming in about 2 or 3 days where we're going to go everything from the Premier League this current weekend. So the games that were played Friday the 14th all the way to Monday the 17th. And then we'll have another episode next week highlighting the 8 final Champions League or the second tie matches from this current round, the knockout round, the finishing of the Europa League, and then previewing any potential round of 16 matchups. So yeah, really, really excited. We've got some good stuff to talk about. Definitely was entertaining in terms of the Champions League. It always is. This is really nice because when it kind of breaks down to just 8 games, you got plenty of time to watch. They spread it out. You got one early game on Tuesday, one early game on Wednesday, 3 later in the day on Tuesday, 3 later on the day on Wednesday. Really helps you, kind of pay attention. And it was a pretty wide range of games, which is always fun. You have watch a Dutch team play an Italian team, Club Brugge hosting a Champions League knockout tie, and then just an old classic for the what feels like a millionth time this decade, Manchester City versus Real Madrid. So we're going to go in the games kind of in order of when they were played. So we'll talk about the 12:45 Tuesday game first and work our way through the rest of the knockout round games going from there. So I'm very excited. This is going to be a really, really fun episode to talk about everything. The first matchup to discuss on Tuesday, the early game, was Brest hosting PSG. Just for some context, Brest finished 18th in the league phase and PSG finished 15th. So the first tie is always going to be at the lower seeded team first. And I know it's a complete revamp of the Champions League. We have the knockout round or the playoff round, knockout phase playoffs, which is a name for sure. I don't know if they could have come up with anything better. In the past, the earliest you could play someone from your own country was the quarterfinals. So you couldn't play anyone in all qualifying rounds to get to the group phase. You couldn't play anyone from your country in the group stage, and you couldn't play anyone from your country in the round of 16. And they've abandoned that. And I don't like that. Half the appeal of the Champions League is to watch teams that normally wouldn't play each other. Liverpool versus, let's say, Aston Villa would be a fantastic Champions League tie. Don't get me wrong, but we get that twice a year in England. So if I could see Liverpool versus Lille or Liverpool versus Aston Villa, I'd rather see Liverpool versus Lille. I'd rather see Dortmund versus Real Madrid than Dortmund versus Bayern Munich. So with PSG playing Brest in the first knockout phase playoff round, whatever it's called, it's a little disheartening. I don't like it. It's not a boycott the Champions League. It's more of a nitpick. It's more of a personal opinion. But I feel like that's kind of taken a little bit from the magic, And I know it was kind of an awkward situation where PSG could have only drawn Monaco and Brest with the way they've got, they pot teams up in groups of 2. But going to this game, I was kind of disappointed. I was like, I don't like this. I wish it was back to PSG had to play like Benfica or Feyenoord, a team in the close ranking of Brest. But it is what it is. Life moves on, and I'm still allowed to watch the game. But let's actually talk about the game. So Brest is going to host PSG, and Brest is not a common occurrence in the Champions League. I believe this is their first appearance. And they do not have a stadium that is of UEFA standards to host this game. So, Brest, to host a home Champions League match, have to play 100 kilometers away. And for us Americans, it's a little over 62 miles. And a good reference point, it's like telling the Boston Red Sox, you got to play in Maine. That's the closest you can play. So that's insane off the bat. And obviously they can still fill all the home fans, but one does think like it can't be the same environment as their traditional home stadium. It can't. You can't replicate the familiarity, sitting in the same seat every game, that just home atmosphere, that warm, cozy, this is our home, this is what we'll defend, this is everything. But it is what it is. You know, you don't have a stadium that's up to UEFA standards, you can't play in a UEFA match. And coming into this game, PSG were massively favored to get a result, even with Brest being at quote-unquote home. And the game got started nearly shakily for PSG. I mean, Donnarumma nearly gave it away pretty early. And then PSG did get their chance, though. 16th minute in, they were dancing around the box a little bit. A penalty off a block shot. Wasn't called at first. VAR took a look. Vitinha scored with a Jorginho-esque calmness to his penalty kick. PSG were up 1-0 16 minutes in. Brest had their chances, though. I mean, they had a couple counters, a couple breaks. They were shooting the ball. They had a breakthrough at one point around the 33rd minute. William Paco for PSG was able to actually make a really good defensive play and catch up. Brest nearly scored right after the corner. It actually hit the post. Got a little deflection or two, but still nearly scored. And the game from around the 40 minute mark was, those 10 minutes. It was really wide open. But then PSG just came out of the second half, and Ousmane Dembele he came into the game on a 9-game scoring streak, including a recent hat trick against Brest in the league. He scores 45 minutes. Brest kept fighting. I mean, they really did. They were putting attack after attack. They really couldn't create anything too significant, but it wasn't for lack of trying. I just think there's like a gap of wealth between the two teams. There's a huge gap between the skill and quality of PSG versus what you're getting at Brest. And then in the 65th minute, Dembele, for the most part, put the tie away with a goal, and that ended up the final score, PSG 3, Brest 0. You never really want to put any predictions out there on the internet, because any bad call can and will come back to bite you in the butt. I'm going to do it anyway. I don't really see a world where Brest can come back 3-0 at PSG's home stadium. This tie is all well and done. And you have to give your respects to Brest. They've had a pretty good Champions League run for the first time out. I know domestically they're sitting 8th with a game that they've played extra. So it's more than likely we're not going to... I mean, I don't want to say we're not going to see them in the Champions League next year. They're only 5 points out of Monaco, who are sitting in 4th. But more than likely, we won't see Brest in the Champions League next year. So it was a good run. But next week in Paris at the Parc des Princes, it's going to be a formality. PSG are going to walk away with that game. Ousmane Dembele is on fire, and it's my favorite type of fire. It is very hard for footballers to reach a level of skill, consistency, and form over the course of an entire season. Not everyone's a Messi or Ronaldo that's going to score 90 goals in a calendar year or 50 goals in an entire season. But one of my favorite almost tropes of soccer is when a player can just get in an incredible run of form for a very short period of time. And that's Dembele right now. He has 18 goals in 10 games. That is absurd. That's a level above Messi, Ronaldo scoring record. Now, I'm not putting him above Messi or Ronaldo. Nobody freak out. I don't need those fans coming at me. But 18 goals in 10 games is unreal. That'd be 68 goals in an entire Premier League season. And it's just one of my favorite things to watch. I love when a player just catches on fire for like a month or two. Because, again, it's really hard to stay hot. Have you seen guys like Marcus Rashford also? When he is on, he can be on. And it's just so much fun to watch because it's just like, what is this guy going to do next? They've got the confidence behind them, and they just keep scoring. They just keep playing well, and eventually they'll fall off. I don't want Dembele to fall off, but more than likely his skill, his form he'll reach a cold patch. But for the time being, this has just been absolutely incredible to watch. Next up on the Wednesday slate was Juventus hosting PSV Eindhoven out of the Netherlands. Juventus came into this game after finishing 20th in the league phase, which is pretty low for a team like Juventus, even if they're having an off season. PSV did well, finished 14th, so the second leg next week is going to be back in the Netherlands. Juventus coming in this game really kind of needing a win. Their domestic season's been a little up and down. They have had an absurdly large amount of ties. So I think structurally, I've been saying all season, I think Thiago Motta has a good team fundamentally, but they've been lacking like that critical edge. A lot of people, I imagine, in the Juventus world are hoping that Randall Kolo Muani is going to be that guy because he's had fantastic form since he's joined Juventus. He scored a bunch of goals. He sent Dusan Vlahovic to the bench and is starting in this incredibly important game. And then as I looked at the lineups, I noticed that Ivan Perisic is at PSV Eindhoven, and I didn't know that. I guess I missed that at some point during the transfer windows. I know he was at Tottenham, and he's been an intern. He's been at a bunch of different teams. Again, that's another trope of soccer that I just absolutely love, is the guys that don't go to the retirement leagues. They just find other teams in Europe. Like, yeah, you could go to the United States, or you could go to China, or you could go to Saudi Arabia or Qatar, and your life could be easier. You could have a simpler time at it. You won't have to try as hard, make a decent amount of money, and whatnot. But no, give me the guys like Frank Ribery, who went to Fiorentina, or even Perisic, who's at PSV Eindhoven. That's the stuff I love. I love the guys who are like, you know what? No, like I'm going to go to the Netherlands, country I'm not from, and I'm going to play for a team that, you know what, they're still in the Champions League. And yeah, I used to be a player in elite teams, but no, screw that. I'm going to go play in the Netherlands. I love that. It's one of my favorite things. Like, keep balling, Perisic. And he did. And we're going to talk about it. But we're not going to talk about it yet. We're going to get into the game. Really cool, always Juventus. You got two Americans starting. Tim Weah, kind of not in his traditional position as a right back, and Weston McKennie playing a little more attacking in the midfield. Not quite a full 10, but more 10-like. And there were some all right chances in the first 20 minutes of the game. It felt nothing crazy. Nothing really like, oh, they should have scored or they're dominating. As like a neutral in a Champions League matchup, that's what you want. You want it open. You want both teams, running down the field, trying their hardest, getting good shots, possession being shared by both teams, which it was. Neither team had more than 53% of possession during the game. And then 33 minutes in, decent run down the right side. PSV, they have a chance to clear it, and they can't. They can't get the ball out of their third. Ball bounces around outside the box. Weston McKennie hits an absolute rocket. I mean, it was a missile. Beauty. Just the perfect strike. Just one of the goals, you get people's attention. You're like, hey, dude, did you see McKennie's goal against PSV this weekend? Or this week? I could talk about it for hours. I could go on and on and on. Even if he wasn't an American, which obviously I'm a little biased here. I love seeing my United States men's national team players doing well. But it was just fantastic. It's awesome. And good for McKennie. He's gotten a lot of crap at Juventus. And I can't say I watch every Juventus game. So maybe I'm not the most qualified to speak on the subject. But when he plays for them and I see him in like Europe or it's brought to my attention, he balls. And he gives 110% every time. Weston McKennie is not going to give you a lack of effort. And I think he is proving that he deserves to be in this Juventus team without a doubt. He is a 10, a midfielder, someone who deserves to be at a great team in Europe. And I think Juventus is right for sticking with him, and props to McKennie for not backing down. But then we get back to the game. The other American, Tim Weah, was doing great. He had some serious runs down the field that I felt as though was really causing trouble for PSV. I know right back's not like his traditional position, as I just mentioned a couple minutes ago, but he has that almost dynamic ability of a winger to where when he does get the ball down the field, he's going to tear you up. He's going to cut it up. And that's what he did. But then, strangest thing happened in the second half. The man I was just talking about and my love for what he's done, Ivan Perisic, got a volley, put the ball in the bottom right corner, showed his class. Your body can shut down. You can't run as fast, can't move as quick, but skill and class are going to be there forever. And he showed that with a fantastic goal. And it looked like this game might be going into the Netherlands on a tie. But that's what it looked like. It's not what it ended up. Francisco Conceição came into the game. He had a nice run, puts the ball in the box, and Samuel Mbengula, right place, right time off of deflection, a striker's goal. 2-1, Juventus win. Heading into the Netherlands next week. Definitely where you want to be going into the next tie, 1 goal up. That's a pretty obvious statement on my end. Juventus were the better team on the night, so I definitely think they deserve the win. It's going to be tricky the next leg. I think next leg is going to be anyone's guess. I'm going to check actually the sports books to see who they have favored. And I don't give betting advice on this show. I don't have anything to do with that, but it's a good reflection of where do people who get paid to predict games think it's going to end up. So it's looking like right now the money line PSV have better odds, but Juventus is favored to advance. Again, not giving any gambling advice, just telling you what the experts are predicting to happen. We're going to transition over to the third game from Wednesday. This was the knockout title fight. This was the main event. This was the biggest game probably on Wednesday in any early Champions League tie. Manchester City versus Real Madrid. A very, 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 very common occurrence in recent Champions League history. The frequency and importance of this matchup in the last couple of years really reminds you of like the Liverpool-Chelsea in the middle 2000s, the stories of Manchester United versus Juventus in the late 90s and early 2000s, and just the absolute frequency in which some teams seem to be matched up in the Champions League. Real Madrid and Bayern Munich played each other a lot. Real Madrid and Juventus, AC Milan and Liverpool. So in the last 10 to 15 years, this game has really elevated its status into one of the elite historical matchups in European football. And this was the 13th meeting between the two teams. Next week will be the 14th meeting. They played some group stage matches back in 2012-2013. Semifinals in 2015-16, kind of a real cagey affair. I remember Real Madrid won on a kind of lucky Bale goal. 2019-20, this was post-COVID, post-lockdown. I think the first game might have been with fans, and the second game a couple months later. Man City, absolute dominant, 4-2 win. 2021-2022, semifinals, absolute classic. Real Madrid wins 6-5 after extra time. 2022-2023, Manchester City basically confirmed they're going to win the Champions League that year. Dominant 4-0 victory over Real Madrid at home. And then last year's quarterfinal matchup where I thought Manchester City played better, but Real Madrid walked away on penalties. And in most of Real Madrid's victories in this matchup, they get that inevitable late goal that's just so associated with Real Madrid. Hint, hint, spoil, spoil. So then the game starts. But actually, before the game starts, Manchester City debuted a Stop Crying Your Heart Out Tifo. Tifo, what is large banner. It's very common. And it seemed to highlight Rodri's Ballon d'Or win over Vinicius. It was an interesting choice. I actually was in the camp that thought that Rodri was a valid Ballon d'Or choice. I don't think we give enough respect to midfielders within the game, within talking of the game. But it was a controversial decision on who deserved the Ballon d'Or nonetheless. Things like that are the ones was like, okay, yeah, I get it. Your boy won Ballon d'Or. You want to show him off. I don't blame you. However, if things don't go your way, you kind of look like a jackass. So you run the risk. That's always the risk you run when you display something so large, kind of boisterous and opinionated. And then the game starts, and you can tell it was pretty open. I wouldn't say pretty open, but both teams were willing to like really fight for it. It wasn't really cagey. It wasn't really open. It was game. I don't know. I think blanket on the word, but it was something in between that. You know, they were willing to take chances, but chances weren't wide open. There were some great individual displays. Vinny had a nutmeg on Ruben Diaz and then hit a little Trivela pass to Mbappe 12 minutes in. That was just disgusting. Really wish Mbappe would have finished that just because that would have been an all-time Champions League assist. A couple minutes later, Mendy had a chance in the box to score. Ferland Mendy for Real Madrid. But, I mean, hey, he's a left back, and left back's going to do what a left back's going to do, you know? If he was a striker, he'd play striker. And then I don't want to say against the run of play, but what had felt like a first 20 minutes that Real Madrid had dominated. A little nice pass by Grealish off the chest of Guardiola, and Haaland scores. It was Haaland's first goal against Real Madrid. They go up 1-0, take that 1-0 lead into halftime, but then about 15 minutes into the second half, free kick, kind of an ugly mishit goal by Mbappe, but what's the expression? You make your own luck. Real Madrid were due to score at some point. It felt like it was coming. Mbappe got the good run, he got the jump on the ball, and sometimes a mishit is the best thing that can happen to you. From there, it felt like Real Madrid was piling on the chances, makeshift right back. Federico Valverde nearly made it 2-1. Bellingham had a chance to make it 2-1. Commentator made a comment about, last year's Bellingham would have scored that, which felt weird, but probably true nonetheless. And then Ceballos, former FA Cup winning champion, Danny Ceballos, gives up a penalty he probably shouldn't have, but connects knees with Foden in the box. Haaland's going to score that every time. Puts it in the bottom left corner. And okay, Man City are up 2-1 in the 80th minute against Real Madrid. I'm sure everything will end up all right. It didn't. It didn't end up all right. Here came Real Madrid. Vinny takes a shot. Ederson, for some reason, takes it off the chest. Didn't really try to make a play with his hands. I think everyone was a little dumbfounded by that. I mean, I know the ball comes at you incredibly fast, but you don't really see many goalkeepers make saves like that. Ball bounces right to Brahim Diaz, gets a goal, tied up. 2-2 in the 86th minute. And then again, this is Real Madrid. Vinny gets the best out of a poor touch by Man City. Ederson again kind of messes up, second time in a row. Comes out when I don't think he really needed to. And then Jude Bellingham had a wide open goal to just gently tap it in and make it Real Madrid 3, Manchester City 2. Real Madrid will have a 1-goal lead going into a home matchup in the Champions League, which I don't think's ever been overturned. Well, that's not true. I think Ajax might have a couple of years ago. Was that 2018-19? The year Tottenham won. Ajax beat Real Madrid in Madrid like 4-0 or 4-1. It was crazy. Real Madrid are full of skill. And obviously, Carlo Ancelotti is a fantastic manager. I don't have doubts regarding either of those two statements. But there's something else there. There's this level of inevitability that is terrifying for other teams who are playing Real Madrid. Because at no point in the game, if you are up late or tied late, can you feel comfortable. These guys, and they've passed it on from generation to generation, have this ability to just produce something late in games. The Zidane, Ronaldo, Benzema, Toni Kroos, Sergio Ramos era of early to mid 2010s Real Madrid that won 4 Champions Leagues, they had it. And they have passed it down to guys like Tchouaméni, Valverde, Camavinga, Bellingham, Rodrigo. They will beat you. Doesn't matter how well you've played. Doesn't matter what's going on. That's why this group has 2 Champions Leagues now in the last 3 seasons. They can play an okay game. You could score 3-4 goals on the tie. But if it's the 86th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, later past the 90th minute, Real Madrid will score against you. It genuinely feels like that as of late. At least in the big games. You know, I'm not going to get into like their league results. But in the Champions League in the last 3, 4, 10 years, Real Madrid have just been inevitable. And it's insane to watch. It's something, it must be psychological. Because I don't think it's anything tactical. And maybe it's confidence. Maybe it's some insane study into sports psychology that one day someone's going to write a really good paper about. But Real Madrid are Thanos. They're inevitable. And they're going to beat you. And they beat Manchester City today. And now the final game on Wednesdays is game number 4. Borussia Dortmund had to travel to Sporting Lisbon. Dortmund finished 10th in the league phase. Sporting Lisbon, or just Sporting, as I'll refer to them for the rest of the time, finished 23rd, which meant Sporting was going to host this week's tie, and next week's tie was going to go to the Westfalenstadion in Dortmund. This was the 5th time, actually, Dortmund and Sporting have played each other. They were put in the same group in 2016-17 in the group stage, and the same in 2021-2022. It was an interesting first half. Sporting nearly had a goal from Araujo as a wonderful strike of his hit the post. The first 30, 35, 40 minutes really felt one-sided in terms of chances. It was all Sporting. And they were getting the ball in the Dortmund territory, pretty deep in the Dortmund territory. They were taking a lot of longer shots, some of them pretty decent. But there was never anything from that first half that made me feel like, oh, like Sporting should have scored there. Didn't really get that. The chances were decent, but they weren't great. And that's not going to win you a Champions League tie because Dortmund came out in the second half and they were playing much better. They were systematic, and it was crosses for the most part. Cross put in, Guirassy gets his head on it, arced it over the new Sporting goalkeeper, who I thought played pretty well, make it 1-0. And then a couple minutes later, Dortmund send in another cross, 68th minute, finds the knee of Pascal Gross, and it's 2-0. At that point, really going to dictate, next goal, I think really was going to dictate the tie. It felt a little cagey there. It goes 2-1, Sporting's back in it. If it goes 3-0, going to Dortmund next week, I think it's over. Sporting sent in a cross. Dortmund started to counterattack, got the ball up to Adeyemi. Adeyemi did some nice dribbling, passes it, little cross in, finishes it, 3-0 Dortmund. Pretty comfortable second half for Dortmund. They weren't favored, but they'll be favored definitely in the next tie. And yeah, that was the final. Sporting 0, Dortmund 3. Yeah, I think everyone who's a fan of Dortmund, plays for Dortmund, follows Dortmund, can agree like they needed this one. Dortmund will take anything they can get right now. They are subpar by their standards in the Bundesliga right now. So when you can get a good Champions League tie and a 3-0 victory away in a Champions League knockout round playoff first leg, you'll take it. One of the beauties of the different cup competitions is it can give you a reprieve away from any struggles in the league. And that's, I think, what Dortmund's looking to achieve. I don't know if this side is built to make a deep Champions League run, but hey, I don't want to be speculative. Let's focus on what happened. And Dortmund picked up a nice victory against Sporting. I think they're going to be very happy with that. It gives them a nice break from everything that's been going on in the league and should set up for a pretty comfortable second tie at the Westfalenstadion. Now we're going to get into the early Wednesday matchup. That was the 9th place team from the league phase, Atalanta, out of Italy, at Club Brugge from Belgium, who finished 24th, barely squeaked into the knockout rounds. This is the first time, actually, in Champions League history that Club Brugge and Atalanta played each other. So, first time. And Brugge came out swinging. No fear out of the team. While I'd say the more historical club in Europe, Club Brugge, Atalanta definitely has more talent, and you couldn't tell. Brugge came out, they kept playing. They were pressing. Talby for Brugge got on the ball, got after it, sent it in to Ferran Yuka, and Brugge were up early. Retegui had a decent chance for Atalanta about 40 minutes in. Kind of the tide of the game had switched. Brugge were struggling to play out the back, and then immediately after another failed clear, Zappacosta sent in a cross for Pasalic, and the former Liverpool goalkeeper, Simon Mignolet, had no chance to really do anything there. Game was tied up and 1-1 going into halftime. So yeah, Brugge kind of dominated that early part of the first half, and then it swung towards Atalanta. And then the beginning of the second half was very similar to the beginning of the first half. Brugge came out of the break better. Atalanta eventually did settle the game down. There was 2 really good chances in around the 65th minute for Atalanta. An open header by Zappacosta, and then a shot. And then more chances came in. Shot by De Ketelaere. Juan Cuadrado had a chance to score. And they really couldn't do anything. And then it gets late. It gets late in the game, about the 94th minute. And this is the big controversy of the game. This is the big talking point of the game. Gustav Nielsen for Club Brugge, the striker who came on, or the forward who came on, was going for a ball in the box against Isaac Hein out of Sweden, the Swedish defender, Hein for Atalanta. And Hein had his hands high as he was trying to push Nielsen off the ball, and his hands did make contact with Nielsen's face. The referee calls a penalty. VAR looks at it. Penalty stands. And then Nielsen scores a penalty for Brugge. Game ends controversially. Atalanta manager walks out before the end of the game. Final score, Brugge 2, Atalanta 1. So yeah, I'm going to address the penalty. The late penalty. I don't think it was a penalty. I don't. It was contact, yes. But it's a contact sport. And that's the whole point of VAR, right? I get people who are anti-VAR. But the whole point of VAR is for when the referee makes a mistake on the field, someone above can be like, hey, you got it wrong. Or even if the referee wasn't sure, like, I can't really tell if that was a penalty. Or they have cameras in place. They have the checks and balances in place to make sure that that doesn't happen. And it did again. And it was so stupid because it was so consequential. This is a Champions League knockout tie. This should be one of Bruges' best wins in Europe ever. But it's hard to look at it like that because there's an air of controversy around it. I don't think it should have been a penalty. I think it was an atrocious, horrible refereeing decision. And that's where the frustration comes from. Because it's like, how can you look at that a second time and call it? It totally ruined what was a pretty good game going up to that point. And it'll make things more controversial going back to Bergamo, Italy and Atalanta in the second tie. Obviously, it's going to be a different referee, which will make the huge difference in the world. And, I mean, all Atalanta needs to do is get a goal away from home, or at home, which I like their chances of doing. I do think Atalanta will be the favorite team to advance. But this was just controversial. This was a game ruined. It's incredibly frustrating. This should have been a great night, and stuff like this happens, and you can't understand how we're in 2025 and things like this are still happening. It's a stain on the game. Then it's time for the next game on Wednesday. The first of the later games we'll talk about. Monaco hosted Benfica. Two closest teams in the league phase standings. Monaco finished 17th. Benfica finished 16th. So the first leg was going to be at Monaco. This is their fourth time ever playing each other in Europe. They were in the same Champions League group stage in 2014-15, or at least their fourth time playing each other in the Champions League. And then they actually had a tie earlier this year in the league phase. Benfica went to Monaco and was down 2-1 pretty late, and they came back and won 3-2. So then we'll get into this game. And it wasn't the most exciting first half. There was a pretty good shot by Benfica in the 8th minute. Or excuse me, there was a good shot by Monaco in the 8th minute that required a great save from the Benfica goalkeeper. Benfica had a good chance in the box in the 44th minute, but that was really the only thing really notable in the first half. And then coming out of the second half, though, I mean, Benfica really, they started out well. It was a great pass and a chip for the first Benfica goal. It was a real striker's goal by Pavlidis. I mean, just beat out the man on a one-on-one ball and chip the goalkeeper. It was very nice. And then 4 minutes later, Al-Musrati gets a second yellow, which I thought was harsh. I know it is technically in the rules. Like, if you motion to a ref for a yellow, they'll give you a yellow. But that just feels harsh. I mean, this wasn't like as an egregious of a call as like the Atalanta game. Like, I'm not going to go on some rant. Oh, the ref. But it was like, did this really need to be this call? Like, that was a lot. And then, fortunately, Angel Di Maria made his first appearance for Benfica in a while, and then went off in the same game hurt. Something you hate to say for the world-class player that he was. And then, the second half, I mean, I can't say this is the most exciting game. Benfica had shots and opportunities, but they really weren't able to get that divisive second goal as the tie heads back to Portugal. So, not really the most exciting game for the neutral viewer. Obviously, Benfica is going to be over the moon going to Monaco and picking up a 1-0 victory. Going into the second tie is going to feel great. And typically, Benfica does pretty well at home. Can be a tricky place to play, as we've seen in past Champions Leagues. So, great win. I mean, this would have been even greater back in the days of an away goal. But another win for Benfica at Monaco this year. Now we'll have to see how the reverse tie fixture does. We're going to move on to Glasgow, Scotland, as Celtic hosted Bayern Munich. Celtic finished 21st in the league phase. Bayern finished 12th. So Celtic's going to host this leg. Bayern Munich will host the next. This is the 5th European meeting between Bayern Munich and Celtic. They shared groups together in 2003-2004 and 2017-2018 seasons, respectively. And this game started off pretty interesting. I thought Celtic went up. They had a good shot from outside, got through, got past Neuer, but there was some offsides interference. He stood right in front of the goalkeeper and made it back to 0-0. Michael Olise had chance after chance. He's just been phenomenal this year. Definitely a great signing by Bayern Munich. Harry Kane had a couple chances towards the end of the first half. He had a header in the run of play in the 32nd minute, and then a back post header in the 44th minute off a corner, which he nearly had opportunities to score on both. You thought Celtic would get to halftime and survive, but that just wasn't the case. Michael Olise gets the ball from Upamecano over the top, cuts it onto his left foot. It was about 17 yards out and just hit an unreal shot to the top of the net to make it 1-0 Bayern Munich going into halftime, which would only make life harder for Celtic, and then Celtic made life even harder for themselves. 4 minutes into the second half, Bayern Munich have a corner, and you let Harry Kane unmarked in the 49th minute at the back post. The one dude. I mean, I'm not saying anything revolutionary here. You read any review, description, analysis of this game, it's how the hell do you leave Harry Kane open in the back post? He's as good as anyone in the world at striking a ball. And he proved that. He scores, he makes it 2-0. Bayern had a couple more chances. There were some pretty good saves by the Celtic goalkeeper, former Premier League champion Kasper Schmeichel. But then Celtic kept pushing. Celtic fought. Maeda nearly scored after a pretty poor giveaway by Bayern. And then in the 79th minute, corner comes in for Celtic, bounces around a little bit. Maeda is able to put his head on it. And now it's 2-1. And there were a few chances. Alistair Johnson got a good shot. That was a nice save by Neuer. And there was one or two others and just a nice run of play. And it was just a shame. It was a shame. Celtic, fought hard. And the final score finished 2-1 to Bayern. It's going to be very tough for Celtic going back to the Allianz Arena. I've said it a couple times in this podcast, and maybe I'll look like a dummy, but there's a few ties where they already look over. I said it about the Benfica tie. I kind of said it about the Real Madrid tie, the PSG tie, the Dortmund tie. If you're going back, if you win away from home in the first leg, obviously in the era without away goals, it's not as much of a guarantee, but it's a pretty safe guarantee, especially considering it's Bayern Munich. All the respect in the world to Celtic, though. They fought really hard. They didn't look like they were just going to sit back, absorb pressure, and try to get something. Celtic took the game to Bayern Munich. They had plenty of chances. They only had 2 shots on goal, but Bayern only had 5. Celtic probably could have put 2 or 3 into the net. They had their chances. They played well. It's a shame it didn't work out. Proper marking on that Harry Kane goal on that corner kick. We could be talking about a 1-1 game, but if and buts are candy and nuts, every day would be Christmas. Celtic fought well, but it's not enough, and unfortunately, they're going to have to go to Bayern Munich down a goal. So it's gonna be really tough for them. Also, can't forget to shout out Celtic's center back duo of the Americans, Austin Trusty and Cameron Carter-Vickers. But then we'll get into the final game on the Champions League slate. Feyenoord hosted AC Milan. Feyenoord finished 19th in the league phase. Milan finished 13th. They have played each other before in the 1969-1970 Champions League, or as it was known then, European Cup. Feyenoord defeated Milan 2-1 on aggregate, and I believe that was the year Feyenoord went on to win the European Cup. I believe they're first and only. And this game went poorly for Milan. They gave up a goal 3 minutes in, a pretty bad goalkeeping mistake by Mike Maignan, and it went 1-0 and stayed that way the entire game, and Milan really weren't able to threaten after that. This was kind of a shocking upset. I thought, first it should have been a clean save by Maignan. I didn't think anything crazy. I mean, Leao had some chances throughout the game, but Milan's midfield didn't really do much. Our boy Christian Pulisic didn't have his best game. He was kind of absent. And the probably only silver lining for Milan here is the fact that the second leg's going to be in Milan. Because besides that, this was a terrible performance. And this is a good Feyenoord team. I mean, they beat Manchester City this year. They're not slouches in the slightest. Or is it they beat Bayern? They beat Bayern. Sorry, I misspoke. They beat Bayern. They beat up on Bayern at home. So this isn't a bad team. But I think AC Milan was looking to get a little more from this. And yeah, I'm very much, anticipating the next tie. Yeah, this is probably the game, kind of like the Benfica game that I have the least to talk about, because it's just one of those days where you're like, yeah, Milan's not going to get anything here. That was the game. So yeah, that wraps up our 8 Champions League matchups. I'm very excited for the return fixtures next week. I think the ones that I think will be the most entertaining: Atalanta, see if they can come back from Bruges. Eindhoven coming back from Juventus. There was no ties, which I think was actually pretty unique. Every game had a decisive winner. The home teams only won 3 games: Club Brugge, Juventus, and Feyenoord. Every other game, the higher-ranked away team won. So 5 teams are going to be going into next week with a lead. I believe the games next week are the Tuesday games will be Bruges, Atalanta, Feyenoord, Milan, Celtic, Bayern Munich, Monaco, Benfica, and then the Wednesday games will be Sporting Dortmund, Juventus, PSV Eindhoven, Man City, Real Madrid, Brest versus PSG. So now I'm going to try to roll through these Europa League and Conference League, the second and third tier European competitions real quick. Obviously, these early rounds are going to get the love, but as they get into like quarterfinal, semifinal stage, I will give them the love that I give the Champions League. In the Europa League, 13th seeded Real Sociedad went to FC Midtjylland out of Denmark and won 2-1. Got after it early, 2 goals in the first 31 minutes. Midtjylland scored after 38th, but that was the final result. 24th seeded Fenerbahce, the last team to get in, hosted 10th seeded Anderlecht and got a 3-0 victory, a resound victory for Jose Mourinho's men. Goals from Dusan Tadic and Edin Dzeko. Ferencváros out of Hungary, who are the 17th seed, hosted Victoria Pilsen out of the Czech Republic, walked away with a 1-0 victory. Ajax, who were ranked 12th, went to Belgium at Union Saint-Gilloise. Probably butchered that. I don't speak French. And they walked away with a 2-0 victory. AZ Alkmaar, who were ranked 19th, hosted Galatasaray out of Turkey. AZ Alkmaar out of the Netherlands, and they walked away with a 4-1 victory. And there was a red card for Galatasaray, so that's going to be a pretty tough result to take back to Turkey. The Europa League tie I was most excited about: Porto, who finished kind of a disappointing 18th, hosted Roma, who kind of also finished a disappointing 15th. Game finished 1-1. Brian Cristante got a red card for Roma in the 72nd minute, so he can't play in the next leg. So I'm very excited to see that as it goes back to Portugal. FC Twente out of the Netherlands hosted Bodo Glimt out of Norway. The Scandinavian team ranked 9th. Twente walked away with a 2-1 victory off a late 95th minute goal. And then the final Europa League match, Steaua Bucharest beat PAK out of Greece 2-1 as they go into Greece. I am going to be honest, some of the Conference League teams I had never heard of or really know how to pronounce the names. In an all-Cypriot matchup, Omonia Nicosia defeated Paphos. Real Betis out of Spain beat Ghent out of Belgium. Heidenheim out of Germany defeated FC Copenhagen in Denmark. Borac Banja Luka out of Bosnia and Herzegovina defeated Olimpija Ljubljana. Bear with me, I'm so sorry. Viking Reykjavik defeated Panathinaikos out of Greece. The Icelandic club having to play their games in Finland. And the last one I'm going to talk about, really cool, Shamrock Rovers out of Ireland. Irish teams usually not too well in Europe. Do too well. Went to Molde out of Norway. And Michael Noonan became the youngest ever goal scorer in a Champions League matchup. His mom posted on Twitter, not Champions League matchup, just any European club matchup. Pardon me. And his mom posted on Twitter that he had to go back to school the next day, which is absolutely hilarious. And before I get into the state of the Cups, how the Cups are doing, there's one Premier League game that we still have to talk about, and it was exciting.
Everton hosted Liverpool in a makeup game, a game that was canceled because of weather earlier in the season. So Liverpool has had kind of this advantage over other teams where they've had this game in hand for a while now. And this also had the added intensity of being the final Merseyside derby at Goodison Park. And things started off well for Liverpool. Completely misspoke. Things started off well for Everton. Beto made a good run on a smart free kick in the 11th minute to slot a ball underneath Alisson's arms to take a 1-0 lead. But then 5 minutes later, Mo Salah sends in a beautiful cross to Alexis McAllister, who heads it into the bottom left corner. There were 5 first half yellow cards, which is fantastic. You love to see it. There was actually a good chance for Liverpool before the half on a Szoboszlai shot. It was kind of a Rebound bounced to Luis Diaz, but it just didn't work out. Everton then scored off a corner in the 66th minute, but it was ruled offsides, which was the correct call. And then in the 72nd minute, a couple shots go in against Everton, Jordan Pickford, and the ball lands at the feet of Mo Salah, and that's never going to end up well for you. And then in the 98th minute, 3 minutes after what was supposed to be the end of extra time or added time, ball gets sent into the Liverpool box, and James Tarkowski hits a wonderful strike, and it was amazing. There was a crowd storming, there was a VAR check, and it tied it up. Final Merseyside derby, Everton 2, Liverpool 2. This game had everything. It had 6 yellow cards, 2 red cards. Granted, the red cards were after the game, and 29 fouls. Everton fans stormed the pitch. They freaked out. I love the social media discourse behind this game and the way Everton fans reacted, because of course you had the absolute nerds, trophy hunters. Oh, how many trophies do Everton have? And it's like, no, who cares about that? Everyone was like, this was awesome. Your opponent, your rival is in a title fight, and you get a last minute goal to produce a draw against them in your final game at that stadium ever. That's incredible. That's what it's all about. And I really like that the consensus of what I saw on social media was like pro the Everton fans. That was awesome. That's how you should react. That's proper soccer. Who cares? Who cares if Everton haven't won a trophy and God knows how long Liverpool's the more successful team? That last minute strike is the stuff of pure emotion and pure passion, and it was just absolutely fantastic to watch. And it's what's the game's all about. I'm really glad those dorks on social media got shut down. David Moyes has done a fantastic job at Everton. They've beaten Tottenham, they've beaten Brighton, they've beaten Leicester, and they've driven Liverpool in the league. They're now a lot further from relegation than they were earlier. And this guy's a classic Everton manager. This is a match made in heaven. He was so successful at his time here. And again, it's the same thing. Like, if you're worried about trophies, you can shut up. David Moyes had Everton finishing in top 4 and top 5 more than once, which is incredible. And he's got them fighting, motivated, playing well. I mean, they took the game to Liverpool. It wasn't like, oh, they sat back and got a couple counters. No. Liverpool dominated possession, but Everton fought. Everton was trying to win that game. They weren't hoping for a point. They got a point, but they were trying to win that game, and it was good. I also actually failed to mention that after the game, the Liverpool manager, Arne Slot, got a red card as well, so he will not be on the sidelines as Liverpool host Wolves this weekend, though. You shouldn't need much managing for that if you're playing Wolves at home. I guess that's kind of mean. And the last thing I want to take away from this Liverpool-Everton game is just how good Mo Salah is. I don't want to say he's single-handedly carrying Liverpool, because that's not the case. There's other class players on this team. But I'm concerned for Liverpool if Mo Salah ever leaves. I mean, he comes into this game, gets a goal, gets an assist. He's constantly scoring, constantly assisting. He's such an attacking threat. He always seems to be the right place at the right time. I mean, we are watching a player who's been so good for so long, it feels like, being able to consistently perform at a top level so far this season. And, he's my player of the season so far. And I don't know what international competition's got going on. There's really not in 2025. But if we're judging the best player and a Ballon d'Or winner for this season, I don't think Mo Salah is that far from a ridiculous shout. He's been just a quality player. So the last thing I want to do today is talk about the state of the cups. State of the cups. We're going to talk about where every cup competition is at in each of the top 5 leagues. So England, France, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Going in alphabetical order. Reason we're doing this because there was a lot of cup matches last week, 2 weeks ago, that we kind of missed on the pod. Didn't have a chance to talk about. Each competition is getting towards the latter stages, so I'd like to think going forward I will cover everything, and this is the only time we have to do State of the Cups. But if I do miss anything going forward, we'll do another State of the Cups. But here's State of the Cups. We're going to start in England. We're starting the FA Cup. Currently, the FA Cup is in the 5th round. This is the round of 16. There's 16 teams left. There's 11 teams from the Premier League and 5 teams from the Championship. The matches are going to be played at the end of the month. So February 28th, March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. There's some exciting matchups. Preston North End and Burnley is an all-championship matchup, which is exciting. The other matches involving championship teams is Cardiff City has to go to Aston Villa, Millwall has to go to Crystal Palace, and Plymouth Argyle, who just beat Liverpool, has to go to Man City, which leaves us with 4 all Premier League matchups. Bournemouth hosts Wolves. Bournemouth's obviously been having a much better season than Wolves. Newcastle hosts Brighton. Manchester United hosts Fulham, and Nottingham Forest hosts Ipswich Town. While I do think Man City is going to get past Plymouth Argyle, I would love to see some, give me like a semifinal of teams like Brighton, Fulham, Newcastle, Nottingham, Crystal Palace, Aston Villa, some non-traditional FA Cup winners. Because the only major non-Big Six team that I can think of that's won the FA Cup in the last 5 to 10 years is Leicester City. So I'd love to see some change in that cup. And yeah, we'll probably report on that because that'll be an FA Cup weekend closer to. And then we head to France, the French Cup, which over 5,000 teams take place, and it's insane how quickly they can break it down. The French Cup is currently in the quarterfinals. There are 4 first division teams, 2 second division teams, and 2 teams from the 4th division in France. Stade Briochin, I think I got that right, is playing PSG. They're home. Caen is another 4th division team who are playing Guingamp at home. Angers and Reims is the only first division matchup, and then Brest is hosting Dunkirk. I do apologize if I butchered any of the French teams. France is probably one of the leagues I pay attention to the least. So that's in the quarterfinals. Those matches will be played around the 25th, 26th, which is the middle of the week, and we'll probably cover them and see where they're setting up for the semifinals. And then we go to the DFB Pokal, which is the cup out of Germany. That is currently in the quarterfinals, and we've already seen some played and some not. I don't know why there's such a discrepancy between when some games are played, but there were 2 games at the beginning of the month. Stuttgart hosted Augsburg and won 1-0 with a goal from Dennis Undav, their good player. And then Bayer Leverkusen got a late goal, shocking, as they do against Köln, to get a 3-2 victory. So Stuttgart and Köln are on to the semifinals. On the 25th and 26th, so the same days as the French Cup, RB Leipzig is hosting Wolfsburg, and Arminia Bielefeld is hosting Werder Bremen. So that's exciting. Bayern Munich were knocked out of the competition in the last round in December against Bayer Leverkusen, and Dortmund was knocked out a while ago. 2 traditional powers. Bayer Leverkusen is last year's winner, and they are still alive. But with the German Cup, there's always potential for a good team. Stuttgart is the team that's fully capable of making a run in this cup. And we're just rolling on and on. The Coppa Italia is currently in its quarterfinal phase. Just like Germany, 2 of the quarterfinals have been played, but 2 still remain. In the quarterfinals last week, in the 4th, Atalanta lost at home to Bologna. Bologna, good team, and they finished 5th last year. And then Milan defeated Roma 3-1 with a double from Tammy Abraham against his parent club, which is a little weird that a team like that can play, or a player like that can play against his parent club, but I guess the transfer loan rules are different over in Italy. Inter Milan hosts Lazio on the 25th of this month, and Juventus hosts Empoli. The semifinal matches are already known. The winner of Juventus-Empoli is going to be playing Bologna, and the winner of Inter-Lazio is going to be playing Milan. And the semifinals in the Coppa Italia are 2-legged. So one game's going to be on April 2nd, and the other game's going to be April 23rd. So it's going to be a little while before we get to the end of the semifinals. And then the final country whose cup competition we want to talk about is Spain and the Copa del Rey. 120 teams enter. We are currently down to 4. Last week, Atletico Madrid beat Getafe 5-0 to advance. Real Madrid hosted Leganes 3-2 to advance. Real Sociedad defeated Osasuna 2-0 to advance. And Barcelona went to Valencia and won 5-0. So the semifinals are set. They are 2-leg matches as well, same as Italy. Barcelona will be playing Atletico Madrid. First game on the 25th of February. Second game on the 2nd of April. And then Real Sociedad will be hosting Real Madrid on the 26th of February. And the return leg on the 1st of April. I believe the last year's winner of the Copa del Rey was Athletic Bilbao. They're out. They were eliminated in the quarterfinal. Or no, sorry. I'm butchering this. Bilbao were eliminated in the round of 16 to Osasuna. So that's where that's at. And that's the state of the cups. That is where the 5 major cup competitions are. Right now, we should be about 53, 54 minutes into the podcast. Still have to do a little bit of editing. By the time you listen to this, it'll probably be Saturday. So a little late. I'm hoping to have an episode, pretty quick turnaround, maybe Monday or Tuesday. Tuesday preferably, about everything that went on in the Premier League this weekend. And then I want to follow that up with another weekend podcast where I talk about the final Champions League results from this week, the 8 return legs, and then the Europa League and Conference League matchups. I don't know what else is going on this week. Yeah, outside of the Champions League, Europa League, and Conference League, there's nothing significant going on in Europe next week. If you made it this far, I just want to thank you. This is Talk Soccer to Me podcast, hosted by yours truly, Jack Alt. Again, thank you for listening. Follows, likes, subscriptions, comments, everything on social media goes a long way for the podcast. Tell your friends about it. Tell your mom about it. Tell your grandfather about it. Anyone you know that likes soccer. Word of mouth. If you're listening this far, thank you. I appreciate it. Hoping to get some sort of intro in the next couple episodes. Maybe some generic little guitar jingle and sound of a crowd score. That would be nice. And this is it. I am out. Have a good week.